Here we go. Here we go. We're here. All right, everyone, tell me which blonde is the prettiest? Don't answer automatically. I'm sure your first impulse would be to say that I am because I'm your host. But disregarding the fact that I'm hosting this live stream right now, and also disregarding the absolutely wretched, horrible, immoral souls of the other two ladies, just purely objectively speaking, based on looks alone, who is the prettiest of the three of us? No. My haters will be able to clip that and say, "Oh my god, can you see? Do you see how delusional she is? Oh my god, she's so delusional." What's up, everybody? So yeah, it is a late one, and it's because I just got off work. But if you're joining us live, or if you're going to be joining us later on, hello, welcome. Yeah, I've got a lot to discuss. And yes, I am wearing the Blake Lively wig. I did have an Amber Heard wig too, if you'll remember. That was actually it was similar. It was kind of an ombre blonde as well, but it was a lighter blonde, and it yeah, it was lighter, and I think it was a bit poofier than this. But I did wear it when I did a couple of videos. I did like 2 or 3 videos impersonating Amber, one where I pretended to be drunk. But people like those, and so but yeah, but this is the Blake wig, and it's definitely been getting a pretty strong response, a strong positive response. So what I want to do actually is this thing is only $15. I want to order a few more cheap wigs, different colors, different styles, and then I can just try them out here on YouTube. And eventually I'll settle on one. I'll just wear that forever, kind of like Mrs. Macron in France with that horrible wig that she wears. I mean, I've seen worse wigs, but it's very obvious that it's a wig. If you're first lady of France and you can't have a more realistic wig, hold on. I'll find it later. But anyway, just know that the president of France is, I'm sorry, his wife, I should say, the first lady of France. I know, it's up for debate. We're talking to Candace Owens, but she does wear a wig. I mean, she's never admitted it, Brigitte Macron, but it's obvious that she does, and it's I don't think it's very good. Well, now that I've talked about it, I have to show you the wig, don't I? All right, we're coming back. So we are going to, in a moment, we're going to start with a conversation about that new Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard book. I did read the whole thing, and I know some people have been commenting about it online. I really thought that it was a fair book, and I understand that there are a number of Johnny Depp supporters that have big problems with it, but speaking as someone who's pretty sensitive to media bias, I thought that it was a fair book, and I thought that it made Amber Heard look terrible. So anyway, but I'm going to talk about the parts of the book that I thought were the most interesting in both negative and positive ways for Johnny Depp. And I'm going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about the Adam Waldman controversy that got kicked up again. I have people tagging me on Twitter and telling me that I need to apologize and all smug and everything. And I'm sorry, y'all, but a cropped email from Adam Waldman still does not constitute evidence of anything. Sorry, it just doesn't. We already know what Adam's opinion is, or what his claims are, or via Jack's, okay? Which is fine. They have every right to say the things that they're saying, but we have every right, people like me who have, I started out believing it, what Jack's was saying and what Adam Waldman seemed to be saying, negative stuff about Brown Rudnick. I started off believing it. If you'll remember, I did a video on it, but then I started to notice that no actual evidence had been provided, and that there were statements that were made by Jax that looked to be incorrect. I'm not accusing her of lying, but I'm just saying that the whole thing started to look a little shaky. And this has nothing to do with Johnny Depp, except that his law firm, or the law firm, I should say, that represented him in Virginia and that won that case for him, Brown Rudnick, they're being accused basically by Adam Waldman and people around him of being corrupt. And so, yeah, so, if you're going to make a big claim like that, you got to back it up with big evidence. So the cropped email from Adam Waldman that does not do it for me. I'm sorry. So y'all can keep tagging me and telling me I owe someone an apology. And I'm just going to keep saying what I said tonight on Twitter is keep smoking the crack. All right. Anyways, we'll get to that in a little while. Adam Waldman also making big claims that he was bugged, basically saying that Amber Heard's team bugged him. And I'm not saying that that is impossible or even improbable. So just because I have issues with the lack of evidence on the Brown Rudnick thing does not mean that in any way I am not sympathetic to Adam Waldman on the larger picture of Amber Heard and that situation. So anyway, we'll be looking at what he's saying online about that. And he posted some pictures. What else? And then there's more BS in the Blake Lively situation. But the big thing that I want to focus on is that she is going to be deposed on Monday, apparently, by Brian Friedman. Even though we're not going to see it or hear it, that is something to look forward to that day. And so we'll talk a bit about that, the Taylor Swift stuff, you know, new updates in that. And then I want to spend a little time talking about the Tulsi Gabbard Iran war dust up, because although I don't normally do politics or foreign affairs on this show, but when I woke up one day and saw that Iran is being bombed and that people are talking about us going to war with them, and this is something that's being entertained apparently by the president and by our leaders, I mean, that's a big fucking deal. And Tulsi Gabbard, as a number of you know, she is one of the few political heroes that I have. And she got into some hot water with Trump because she basically went off the playbook. And so I want to talk about that. What do I think of that? Now, they've patched things up, at least for the public. And the public now, we're being told, oh, there's nothing to see here. Everything's fine. They're on the same page. But that definitely is not the case if you read between the lines or just even reading over the lines. So we'll talk about that. That's interesting. And I don't claim to be an expert on Middle East foreign policy, but I've been around a long time, y'all. I'm older than I look. And I remember the post 9/11 wars, particularly the one in Iraq. And, you know, my dad was in Vietnam. Like we've been in a lot of wars in our country that really turned out to be pointless. So I really wish that we could just stay out of the fucking Middle East can we at least give it a decade? But we can't do that, can we? We cannot fucking do it. So I don't know. Talk about that a bit. I do have thoughts on Tyler Perry's the MeToo lawsuit against him. I think it's bullshit. Shocker. I don't know. Some of you are getting really hyped up about this. I see people online saying, "Oh, he's finally being exposed." Yeah, I know that there's some of you who just so want to believe that Hollywood is a hotbed of Satanism and child abuse and things like that. And I'm not saying that there is not some abuse that goes on, but it's the same thing like with Sean Combs, where now that it's actually in a court of law, what do we find out? Oh, there was nothing going on with kids. There was nothing going on with people being videotaped under surveillance. There was nothing going on here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All this stuff had been blown out of proportion. And what does it turn out was really going on with Sean Combs? Some kinky sex with his girlfriend and domestic violence. I'm not saying that's okay, but it was such a shrinkage occurred in the Sean Combs Diddy situation from what people had been gossiping about online for months and months and months. So people just love to some people just love to buy into any narrative that makes people in Hollywood look bad. And so Tyler Perry has been a target really in the media, I think, or on social media ever since he helped Meghan Markle. And I'm not a big Tyler Perry fan. I mean, I hate probably every fucking movie that guy has ever done. Way overrated. You know, I remember years ago, I was leaving the movie theater. I'd gone to see some movie, and there was this gigantic line of people waiting to see a movie. And I thought, oh my God, I didn't realize that there were any big movies out this weekend. What are all these people standing in line for? And so I asked somebody, I said, that's It's weird that we only have 48 people on tonight. Even for a midnight stream, that's kind of odd. But I wonder if, hold on a second. I mean, it's fine. I'll talk to 10 people, but hold on a second, though. I just want to make sure, though. Okay, I guess we're good. Anyway, it turns out this movie that all of these people were standing in line for, it was Why Did I Get Married Part 2 by Tyler Perry. And so I watched this movie later on, and it was terrible. Just tons of like cliches and poorly drawn characters and humor that's just not hitting the mark. Anyways, that's what I feel about Tyler Perry. I've tried to watch some of his other stuff, so I've just not found anything that I thought was actually any good. But that lawsuit, I read it, and of course, a few of the allegations are serious, but not only are most of the allegations silly, they're contradicted by the very text that are presented in the lawsuit. In other words, this is what I'm saying. In that lawsuit against Tyler Perry, I noticed over and over and over that the description of the conversation presented was different than the actual and hyperbolized and way exaggerated, distorted. It was way more exaggerated, these conversations, in the way that they were being retold in the lawsuit itself than in the actual texts and DMs that we were given in the lawsuit. And so I went through and I just kept comparing. And so the paragraph, one paragraph might say, and then in a text conversation, Tyler Perry threatened the plaintiff and said that if plaintiff did not have, I'm just kind of ad-libbing here, but if plaintiff did not have sex with him, then he would be kicked off the set the next day or whatever, right? This was in the write-up. Then you look at the actual text and it's something very, very different than that. Not threatening at all. So when you do stuff like that, you're suing somebody for 260 million or whatever, and you do something like that repeatedly in your lawsuit itself, misrepresenting the conversations that you're presenting to us in the lawsuit, then I have to say no bueno. Then I can't take this seriously. And truth be told, I didn't even have to read the lawsuit to know that it was probably BS, because we have reached a point, and I've said this before, but it's just becoming more and more apparent to me. We have reached the point where I would feel very comfortable in saying that I think 80 to 90% of MeToo claims against celebrities or high-profile people are bullshit. Now, I'm not talking about your average, everyday situation or what a small-town sheriff might see in terms of rape allegations or whatever, but I'm talking about these high-profile lawsuits against wealthy and or powerful men. And by the way, it's going to start getting into women as well, women being sued more often, because they don't make as good a targets as men, but they can be targets. So we've just reached a point now where so many of these high profile cases have been invalidated, or at least have been put into serious doubt by subsequent information that has been released, subsequent disclosures, subsequent discoveries. It's just happened again and again and again. And so I have just come to the conclusion, and it doesn't take a brain surgeon to come to this conclusion, but I've come to the conclusion that the perfect storm, I should say, or the perfect trifecta of money, fame, and psychological disorders, perfect personality disorders, that this perfect trifecta is what is fueling almost all high-profile Me Too cases. I really think, I used to say that Me Too was overall a good thing. That's the thing that we feel like we all have to say, right? At the same time that we say that the vast majority of rape allegations are true, even though we don't really know that. And as I've said before, the statistics are all over the charts on different research that's been done. But up until recently, I think a lot of us wanted to make a point of saying that, of course, we know that there were a lot of problems in the entertainment industry that needed to be cleaned up, and Me Too was overall, it was a good thing, and blah, 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 blah. I'm not even willing to go that far anymore. I don't think Me Too overall was a good thing. I think you have a small sliver of cases that turned out to be legit, and a whole lot and a whole bunch of opportunistic bullshit. I really do. I really do. And unfortunately, I think what Me Too has taught us is how many women are capable of this type of deception. You know, it's ironic. If Me Too had never happened, I would have a much higher opinion of women than I do now. Me Too has done more to hurt the image of women than I think anything else in the last 10 years. It's so ironic. It's so ironic. It has, because there have been so many cases now that have been exposed, and people used to have this illusion that women generally don't lie about this stuff. Me Too and the fallout from Me Too and the bullshit of Me Too has exposed the fact that actually, at least some women, a decent number of women, a lot more than we might have thought, are capable of lying. I mean, how different were things? How different was the environment? How different were attitudes when Amber Heard in 2016, was it, did that walk of shame outside the courtroom with her fake bruise and all of that? And of course, the bruise that disappeared the next day in paparazzi photos, right? But when she did that, I totally believed her. Because up to that point, it's not that I had never had experience with women lying on a personal level, but up to that point, I had never really had it demonstrated to me. The lengths that women are willing to go to, in especially in these high profile cases. And so I believed it. I believed it. Now it's like I'm most likely to disbelieve without even looking into it, because we've learned so much about the lengths that some people are willing to go to and how messed up some people, some women, people in general, but some women really are when it comes to this stuff, and how a lot of these, I would say most of these high profile celebrity Me Too cases, deeply problematic, deeply problematic. So we're going to talk more about that, and I'm going to talk about a bit more about the Tyler Perry thing, but also I want to kind of do an overall assessment of, there have been a number of accusations now. Jared Leto is another one that's pretty new, or a set of accusations. And I have not really addressed it, but Candace Owens' series on Weinstein, I understand that Weinstein ended up being reconvicted for some things in New York. He was reconvicted for something, and then I think something was thrown out. I haven't looked at it because, frankly, I've never looked into the Weinstein situation, never wanted to. But watching Candace Owens' series and seeing how irrationally some of his accusers behaved, and you had a situation where like an accuser is describing his balls, and then it turns out Weinstein didn't have any balls. You might say, what? He has kids. Yeah, he had to get his balls like tucked into his thigh. It was some kind of, I'm serious, it was some kind of medical problem that he had. And the way that they solved it, this was a number of years ago, was to reposition his balls within his thighs. You can look it up, okay? But the point is, he had this major anatomical issue that this woman who claims to have seen his anatomy just completely didn't mention. You got another one who, after she claims that she assaulted Weinstein, kept wanting to have sex with him, wanted her mom to meet him. They all wanted favors after the fact. I mean, y'all, you cannot convict men for things when their victims, supposed victims, are acting this irrationally. I'm sorry. I'm sick of being told that when someone is assaulted, we cannot expect any kind of rational behavior from them. Well, there's rational, and then there's just like basic human behavior that just doesn't make sense. These people acting in a completely alien way. I'm tired of it. But anyway, huge stories in the Weinstein thing. Huge problems in the Weinstein narrative, right? So anyway, we're going to talk a bit about that, where I think things are at with Me Too in light of these different cases. And I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. We'll talk about that more. And then I want to spend a lot of time talking about the EricDane story, because for some reason, this one, I know tragic things happen to celebrities all the time, but for some reason, this one has really struck a chord with me, and I'll talk about that. And I kind of want to use this also and we're going to look at his interview, his recent interview. But I want to use this also as a kind of a launching pad for a kind of a side project that I'm going to be doing over the upcoming months, which is basically a kind of a philosophical examination. I'm going to look at philosophy, religion, psychology, all kinds of things, but examination of really some of the toughest, and I have to say, yes, most depressing questions about life. And so we'll talk about that more when we get to it. It's definitely not going to be for everyone. I'm not even sure it's for anyone other than myself and maybe a few other people who share the cynical view of life that I seem to have at this moment. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So yeah, it's a lot to do and a lot to look at. So let's start with the Johnny Depp Amber Heard book. I'm going to change the image here. Oh, happier times. Oh man. So I know that some people really hate the book and think that it's really unfair to Johnny Depp, but honestly, I thought it was a really fair book. I thought you come away from it thinking that Amber is the villain, even though the writer does present both sides or both perspectives, and there are interviews with people in Amber's team that come into play, although I think some of the disclosures that Amber's team makes actually makes them look bad. But I thought that overall it was about as even-handed as you can expect from a book like that. And there were a number of things that stood out to me. First of all, it's clear that Amber and her team were really surprised when they won the UK verdict, and that they were expecting that it was maybe not going to go their way. And so you get a real emphasis in the book on the joy that Amber and her side were feeling. And one of the things that I think is funny in retrospect is that one of Amber's attorneys, Jennifer Robinson, she was the one who was friends with the judge socially, right? And anyway, her main lawyer, right, on the UK team. But in the book, Jen talks about how right after the UK verdict came in, and they were all so elated for Amber, that she told Amber that she should use this as her springboard to really go out and start discussing this case publicly more. In other words, she was encouraging Amber to do more of what ended up getting Amber in trouble. And she said, like, this is your issue now. You need to own it. You need to grab it and use this as your platform. And you need to go forward and talk about this a lot. And basically, Jen was suggesting to Amber that she basically marry herself to this topic even more than she already had. And it's just funny to see the overconfidence that they evidently had at that point, that Amber's team evidently had at that point after that UK verdict, and contrast that with where she ended up, which was, as you know, being the world's most despised woman in the wake of that Virginia trial. It's also interesting to me, speaking of trials and expectations, that it seems like no one, apparently no one, including Johnny Depp's own lawyers, believed that he was probably going to win the Virginia case. And Johnny was being, I don't want to say pressured, you can say that maybe, but he was being strongly encouraged by a number of people to try to settle with Amber right up until just several weeks before the trial. And people all around him, telling him that these even there was even a quote in there from the judge, and I didn't exactly understand this, but the judge telling him, "You are going to lose this. You need to settle." Maybe that was not the same judge as Karate, who ended up presiding over the case. But there's a part in the book where Johnny Depp is going to go into mediation. He's doing the pretrial mediation to try to settle things or see if things can be settled with Amber. And a judge tells him, "You are going to lose this if it goes to trial." And so anyway, my point is, maybe someone else can add some clarity to that, but my point is that it seems like pretty much everyone was expecting him to lose that. And so I say this to all of you, we are very lucky. Johnny Depp is very lucky that that Virginia trial turned out the way that it did, and that jury handed down that verdict, because apparently not only could it have gone a different way, but a lot of people were expecting that it would. Not that Johnny Depp didn't have all this evidence as he did of Amber's lies. But again, y'all, that is just how this, I keep saying this in regard to the Baldoni thing. That is how tough it is. Even in Virginia with the weak anti-SLAPP, but that is how tough it is to prove defamation. Now, it's interesting that that his attorney, that Depp's Brown Rudnick attorney, lead attorney, Ben, was quoted in the book as saying that he thought that things were going to be more positive for Depp than in the UK trial, because you didn't have a judge presiding over the verdict, you had a jury. And then he thought that a jury would be more sympathetic to Depp, as it turns out. So anyway, so I thought that was interesting about the sort of the reversals of fortune that happened between the UK trial and the Virginia trial, and how that was perceived by the main players involved. And I thought that the part about the wedding was really interesting. You know, Johnny Depp's marriage or wedding to Amber, and according to the book, it was 90%. Remember, they got married on his Caribbean island, right? According to the book, it was 90% Amber's friends and like almost no friends of Johnny's, because the book said he was embarrassed, really honestly, embarrassed to have any of his friends around for this. And the book talked about, it was quoted the chef extensively and some others about how everybody, particularly Amber's side, was all drugged out. And people were just constantly drinking and drugging, that Amber and her friends were guzzling $500 bottles of wine, just like holding them by the wine bottle like a bunch of animals, and like sloshing it around and pouring it out and stuff like that. But basically the point is just that from the word get, right? Like from that Caribbean wedding, it was pretty obvious that this thing was a disaster. And you almost get the feeling that like Johnny was hostage almost at his own wedding. There was a funny anecdote in there too about how when Johnny and Amber got married in an earlier, so they got married, I think legally in California, if I'm remembering it correctly. They got legally married in California, and then they had their big ceremony in the Caribbean, right? But the California ceremony was witnessed by Betty Sue, Johnny Depp's mom, and or maybe it was I think it was that, or it was a reception afterward. But anyway, here's the point. Yeah, I think it was during the wedding, if I remember correctly. So you got Johnny and Amber who are making their vows, and you've got Johnny's mom there among some other friends and family, right? And apparently Johnny's mom, Betty Sue, said really loudly, she don't love him. Apparently Amber could hear it, like it was that loud. So you get the image. It's coming back to me now. Like, yeah, they were doing the ceremony, right? And I think it was at night too. It was someone's house. You got Johnny and Amber there, and you got Johnny's mom, Betty Sue. She don't love him. Her thick Kentucky accent. So anyway, that was interesting. Of course, Betty Sue, rest in peace, she's a big part of the problem there, and a big reason why Johnny Depp ended up gravitating to Amber Heard, I believe. Another thing that was interesting is we get a lot more insight into the making of the Rum Diaries, and which is again where Johnny Depp met Amber. He was helping to cast the role of his love interest, Chenault, in that movie. And apparently there were other actresses up for it, but something about Amber, really grabbed him. And he said, in fact, yep, that's the one. She could destroy me. Because apparently this character was supposed to be someone who kind of enticed the narrator into something destructive. I haven't seen the movie in a while, and I thought it was kind of boring, honestly, when I did. So I don't really remember. But she's supposed to be, Amber's character is supposed to be sort of like the ultimate temptation for men. And so Johnny, that he responded to her out of the various actresses who tried out for this. That's the one that he responded to. Now, apparently, nobody knew that she was gay, or at the time presenting herself to be gay. She was, Amber was married, as you'll remember, to Tasha, the one that she would end up assaulting in the Washington airport. And so apparently the producers didn't know this. Johnny Depp didn't know this until after she had gotten the role. And apparently some of the producers really flipped out when Amber brought her wife to set the first day of filming or before filming and introduced her to everyone. And apparently one of the producers was like, she's gay, because they were worried that there wouldn't be any chemistry between her and Johnny Depp. And Johnny Depp basically said, I don't think you have to worry about that. So isn't it interesting? I know people can be legitimately bisexual, but isn't it interesting how Amber goes from this relationship, multi-year relationship with a woman, to then Johnny Depp? I don't know. I think it just reinforces the fact that she was with Johnny Depp for his connections and his money and his influence and his stardom. What is it that she told her assistant? I'm just dating some old man. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so you get more of a sense of kind of how things were early on the Rum Diary. What else? There's a lot of attention paid to the Australian fight. And one of the things that I really like about this book actually is that I thought that the writer did a good job of pointing out the lies and contradictions. She didn't do it sometimes like right in your face, but pointing out the lies and the contradictions between what Amber said and what was indicated by evidence. And so I thought that she did a good job in that. I'll tell you something, a couple of things that stood out to me. First of all, it stood out to me that you have all of these people working for Johnny Depp that are in this real bind because they don't seem to feel like they can be totally honest with him. And I'm not saying that has anything to do with Depp himself, although I don't know, it might. Maybe that's just the nature of an employer-employee relationship. But you get the sense that there were all these people around him, assistants and so forth, employees, security, who felt like they had to tiptoe around Johnny Depp. Obviously, had to tiptoe around Amber because she's crazy and toxic and abusive, but that they felt like they had to tiptoe around Johnny Depp too. Not anything to do with an abusive temperament or anything like that. But you get the sense that they felt like they could not totally level with him at times, or they had to watch his feelings and stuff. And that was one of those things that to me did cast Depp in a more negative light than we as supporters might like ideally. But look, that's the reality of who a person is. And I've certainly heard much worse about celebrities and how their relationships with their employees. And there was nothing in there to indicate that that he wasn't really sweet and wasn't really gentle with his employees. That's not what I'm saying. But it just gives you, it's just weird. It's just a weird world and environment when we talk about the way that these celebrities live, where there's this blurring of the line between friends and employees. And it's like the celebrities want to believe that they have a friend relationship, but it's very, very clear that the employees, they might even love that person, but the employees are always very aware of a line and of not being able to full on tell someone what they really think, right? How are we going to tell him this? How are we going to get him to do this, right? So that's one thing that's interesting. Another thing is how much they wrecked that house. Oh my God, that Australia house. And again, I know that Amber was the one who was being violent and was the aggressor, right? That place, there was a section of the book, a part of the book where it's like a page of just going through all of the damage that that one of Johnny's employees had to end up dealing with. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is that the employee of Johnny's who had to deal with cleaning all this up, he could not approach a contractor about all of the damage, because that would then give it away that something bad had happened and it would start the rumor mill. So he had to, for every piece of work, of repair work that needed to be done, and it was everything from redesigning or refashioning antique lampshades that had gotten paint or blood thrown on them, to, a TV that had some glass thrown into it, broke the screen or whatever. I mean, just stuff all over the place. But this guy who was in charge of getting this stuff repaired, he had to for each piece of damage, he had to individually contact individual people, because he didn't want the big picture becoming clear to anyone. So I thought that was kind of interesting how he had to go through the repairs piecemeal. And so he and a few other employees of Johnny stuck around for a while after Johnny and Amber had gone back to the States to try to fix as much as could be fixed, right? So it was a lot of damage. Again, just kind of thinking of these employees and how they're sort of orbiting around all of this drama, and how interesting and problematic it must be to have to sort of negotiate that line. I thought, so anyway, I thought that was interesting. And I think that you really see the toll that all of this emotionally took on Johnny Depp and those around him. And there's not one conversation or scene in particular that stands out to me, but just the fact that in the book, after each disappointment, whether we're talking about the T Amber and the TMZ story, or the Sun story, the wife beater story, or the UK trial loss, or whatever, after each one of these episodes, these negative episodes, you see how it just really, really destroyed, really hurt Johnny Depp. And that, there's a particularly poignant story right after the UK verdict came in, when Stephen told Johnny that they had lost, right? And Johnny said, I just need to get a shirt and I just need to write wife beater on that. And I just need to wear that everywhere I go. And something about that I thought was really sad, that he just felt that demoralized. I mean, obviously it's a joke, he wasn't going to do that, but that he felt that demoralized, that basically he felt that he had been sentenced to having this stigma the rest of his life on his back, so to speak, or on his front, right? Like a scarlet letter, wife beater. And I do remember how demoralizing it felt after that UK verdict. That's when I really started paying attention to all of this and following it online. What really got my attention, as I've said, is Johnny Depp's lawsuit. But I really started paying close attention to all of this after that UK verdict, because I was so naive about all of this and about the law and about how hard it is to prove defamation. And I figured, once I heard those tapes, that surely it would be so obvious to the judge what had happened here. And then reading Johnny Depp's lawsuit, I mean, it was so convincing. It had so much evidence in it, so much testimony. I thought, there's no way that the judge is not going to get what's going on here. And so when that verdict came in, and then Johnny Depp, remember, he lost the Grindelwald's role almost immediately, right? He was dropped by Warner Brothers. When that happened, then I really started paying attention. But I think that everyone who was Team Depp was so demoralized by that. And I just remember this picture. And this is referenced, by the way, like I said, in the book. This. I just remember, so this was the day when she found out that she had won, and they had a party. She and her supporters, her friends, had a little party, and people brought like balloons and stuff. And this was the paparazzi. They talked to her outside, and she was all cheerful and smiling, right? And I just remember feeling so demoralized. And it's interesting because in the book, you get that same sense about Johnny Depp, that this was the lowest that he got in this whole process. And you also get the sense, reading about Amber's team, that they were elated. They thought that this meant that they were home free. You might say, what? Well, they still had the Virginia thing. Yeah, but they didn't know for sure if that was going to happen. I think there was still an idea. I think that they had a lot of hope that after this UK verdict, Depp would settle. And then they also thought that crazily enough, that the Virginia trial was actually gonna be worse for Depp than the UK trial because the standards supposedly it's supposed to be easier to prove defamation in the UK, or the standards are more for the plaintiff than it is in the United States, although that turned out not to be the case in this instance, right? And so again, the reversal of fortune aspect of reading this book is what I found to be the most interesting. Yeah, there was some revelations here and there and some interesting stories, but that was mostly what I thought was interesting was the sense of the reversal of fortune. So bulletin board says, Guten Tag, I'm looking forward to see Blake end up in Spain too, just by just by herself. Oh man. Well, she's got her baby's daddy, Elon, footing the bill for everything. So that's the thing. It is kind of like Amber Heard got a happy ending still. I hate to say it. I mean, overall, I think that fortune has not favored her. She's among many people, most people, her reputation is in tatters, and she's got the scarlet letter, so to speak. And I don't think that she's going to have much of a career going forward from here. But I really do think that all three of those kids of hers, wait, is it three? Yeah, right? Did she have two or three? I think all of her kids are Elon Musk's. I absolutely do. I think that his relationship with her was probably never completely severed. And if it was, I think that those kids are his. He has such a compulsion to reproduce. And I think if he did that once with her, he'd probably do it again. So I don't know. I think Elon is footing the bill for all of her life, her lifestyle. So anyway, that's my verdict on that. Um, but yeah, so I try to keep this in mind too when we talk about then the Blake Lively situation, because like the other day, I know it was a real gut punch to get that decision by the judge, basically throwing out the defamation, or not basically throwing out the defamation claims, and I believe the extortion claim as well, right? It was a gut punch in the Baldoni Lively thing. And to me, that decision by that judge, what, a week or two ago, to me, that's Blake Lively's equivalent of what we're seeing here with the premature declaration of victory that Amber Heard enjoyed after the UK verdict. And I do think that we will look back and we will say that that was Blake Lively's false peak, so to speak, or that was sort of the apex of things looking victorious for her. And then I think what we're going to find, just like we found with the Amber Johnny situation, is that you have this momentary peak where things looks like, they won, and then you're going to see just a decline into, I mean, we've still got this whole legal case, her legal case, his lawsuit, a number of the claims still going forward. You've got an attorney in Brian Friedman who is completely determined to not only drag this thing out, but to drag it out in the public eye as much as possible. And so, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more to go to unwind here, so to speak. And again, we may end up getting a trial. I mean, there's still claims on the table, so we'll see. But anyway, I think that's kind of interesting. So yeah, so that's what I would say about that book. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else. I mean, there was a lot in the book, but anything else of note? Bianca Butti, you'll remember her. That was the woman that Amber dated dated throughout the UK trial, right? And Bianca is quoted in this book as saying that she absolutely believed Amber's claims. And she said that Amber would, when she and Amber would get into a verbal argument, that Amber would recoil recoil fearfully, as if she had been abused in the past, in a past relationship. Do I think that it is possible that Bianca really believes this? Absolutely, because let me tell you something. I think that Amber's entire relationship with Bianca from start to finish was a PR op. I really do. Bianca, as a number of you know, is a cancer survivor. And when she dated Amber Heard, not only had she survived breast cancer, a very public battle with breast cancer, but also she had suffered a serious recurrence. And when she was with Amber, she was still going through treatment. I don't think that it is at all a coincidence that Amber Heard chose to date a very public, very sympathetic cancer survivor. I also don't think that it's any coincidence that she chose to go back to dating women. Because remember, right after she and Depp broke up, she dated men, Elon Musk, and then wasn't there someone else? Anyway. But when Johnny Depp sued her and when his claims became public, you notice how she started not only started dating a woman, but she started dating a woman who is extremely sympathetic, a cancer patient. And I think that she was doing that because she wanted to get as much sympathy as possible. Now, here's my point. If Amber knew that getting public sympathy was important and that also it was important to have this woman on her side. Look, I mean, it's aesthetically it's important. When you're being accused of interpersonal relationship violence, but then you have this woman who's in a relationship with you, who's standing by you and is going to court with you and is filming and all of this. It sends a message to people, no, this woman isn't an abuser. Or why would she have this woman standing by her if this woman is being abused, right? And so here's my point. I think that Amber probably put on a show, a really good show for Bianca when they were in that relationship. I think that she probably took great care to not reveal her true self. I mean, let's not forget that people with these kinds of disorders, we're talking about narcissism, we're talking about borderline personality disorder, they are really good at hiding who they are from a lot of people. And so I think that the stakes were very high. I think that Amber knew that she needed to be on her best behavior. And so I really don't doubt that what Bianca says. I think Amber probably the whole time they were in that relationship was feeding into these ideas that she had suffered abuse from Depp. And so this whole, oh, she recoiled when we get into an argument, absolutely believe that. So I just say Bianca is another person who has been deceived by Amber. Okay. I think let's talk about Blake. Oh, I know the other thing we're going to talk about. What's with the Adam Waldman stuff? So oops. By the way, y'all, I just found out several weeks ago that Adam Waldman had gotten a divorce. I don't know any details about it, but I just wanted to take that opportunity, though, when I found out about that, to say that Barbara, his wife, Barbara, her products are so overpriced, ridiculously overpriced. Not very good. Seriously, Barbara Sturm, it's Barbara Sturm. She's a dermatologist. And I always had to bite my tongue all of those years because, it's Adam Waldman's wife. I didn't want to insult her products and everything when he was defending Depp. And, Johnny Depp even said publicly that he uses Barbara Sturm products. So I didn't want to say anything, but those products, they are the biggest waste of money. They're the biggest waste of money. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. Like, I've talked to some dermatologists, people who do this stuff for a living. They're like, oh, yeah, she's not. I mean, she's not even up there with like Obagi. So ridiculously overpriced, and she has this whole like non-retinoid philosophy that you shouldn't use retinoids because they're hard on your skin or whatever. And it's like, okay, but what about all the Botox that's obviously in your skin, lady? Come on. But a no retinoid philosophy, I don't know what to do with that because retinoids are the most highly proven, going back to the 70s, of skincare products. And I can say from my own experience, one of the few things that I've ever used that's effective. So I don't know, but I just know that I've done a lot of research on her products. I've talked to other dermatologists, and the word on the street is that she's one of those people that you buy her products if you want to look like you have a lot of money. In terms of you want to look like you can afford these, but you don't buy those products to actually do effective things to your skin. So anyway, it was a little bit about that. But Adam Waldman, look, y'all, I don't know where this idea came from that I'm some kind of an enemy of Adam Waldman or that I put him at the end of my Johnny Depp documentary that I did, where I put all the best evidence together in one documentary, and I put him at the very end with Depp, walking triumphantly. Because I appreciate so much of what he's done for Johnny Depp, and I appreciate that he's been such a strong public advocate for Johnny Depp. And I appreciate that he's had a very aggressive media strategy. It's the same thing that I like about Brian Friedman. There are too few lawyers who realize that in these cases, these big Me Too cases, that you need to have an aggressive PR strategy. And so I never had any issues with Adam Waldman ever until the allegations against Brown Rudnick against the attorneys that won Johnny Depp's case. And some people say, well, no, it was really Adam Waldman who won it because he had gotten all this stuff beforehand lined up for them. It's like, okay, whatever, maybe, but we all watched the trial and we all saw them working seemingly very hard and Camille busting her ass twice, interrogating Amber Heard and doing so very effectively. So my point is that Brown Rudnick has built up a lot of goodwill. I understand that Adam Waldman has built up a lot of goodwill over the years through what he's done for Depp, but Brown Rudnick has also, through what we all saw in that trial, also built up a lot of goodwill. And so if someone is going to make, and I'm talking about either Adam Waldman or I'm talking about people online close to Adam Waldman who have purported to speak for him in some way, if you are going to make serious allegations of corruption against the attorneys that everyone saw seemingly win Johnny Depp's case, and I have to say the case that Adam Waldman was in charge of, the UK case, he didn't win that. Now, I know there was a lot of differences in that case. We've already talked about it in the UK trial, I should say, and the Virginia trial. But if we're just looking at the attorneys that were in charge, the Brown Rudnick attorneys won their case. Adam Waldman did not win his. So I just want to put that out there. And all that is to say that when you tell people that the attorneys that won Johnny Depp's case are corrupt and were in bed with Elon Musk and were basically more or less refusing to or intentionally dragging their feet on subpoenaing Elon Musk, and when you accuse them of intentionally sabotaging you and sabotaging Adam Waldman and doing all this corrupt stuff, well, you have to bring evidence of that. You just have to. Like, I shouldn't even have to say this to Johnny Depp supporters. That is what blows my mind, is there's so much anger online. Some of you, not most of you don't even know what's going on or care. But there is this small group of people who are incensed, Johnny Depp supporters who are incensed at Brown Rudnick and Ben and Camille for, they think, being in bed with Elon Musk and more or less sabotaging aspects of Johnny Depp's case and overbilling, et cetera, and sabotaging Adam Waldman, all this. These are like serious claims to make against the attorneys that everyone saw win that case. So if what you were saying is true, and if you want to put these allegations out there in some form or fashion, then yes, you have to bring actual evidence. And I just can't believe that I'm having to say this to Johnny Depp supporters. You all should know this. You should know it. I just don't understand. So I don't understand how somehow with some of you, among some of you, I've become the bad guy just because I have asked, since all of this started, since all this got kicked up between Jax and Adam, I can't remember who started bringing this stuff up first. I just ask, if you're going to say these things, imply these things, basically make these accusations, then you have to provide some evidence. And somehow I'm the bad guy for that. And some of you are so deranged about Laura B, not the Laura B who does my modding, but the other Laura B. Laura, she was one of the other people asking questions even before I did, actually, because at first, like I said, I believed this narrative. I had no reason not to, this narrative of corruption, but then I expected some evidence would come and it never did. It still hasn't. It still has not come. But Laura B was one of the early ones who was really questioning this. And some of you have such a poisonous history with her. I don't even understand it all, But some of you have such a poisonous history or poisoned history with her that you seem like you're deranged. I'm serious. You seem like you're deranged. And so I don't want to get into all of this drama. I've had my own history with Laura B, but we both, after a certain point, realized that we were misunderstanding each other and talking past each other, and that we had gotten some negative initial first impressions, and things have been fine for a long time. So it's not like I don't understand what it's like to have some issues with Laura B. But all I could see is that she was just asking questions. She was asking you all to present some evidence. She was trying to say, hey guys, I think it's wrong to be trying to destroy Brown Rudnick's reputation and the reputation of these attorneys who won this case for Johnny Depp without evidence. That should not even be controversial. Now, what's kicked this whole thing up again recently is that one of the people who's been speaking for Adam, more or less, posted, hold on a second, I'm going to bring it up. Okay. So Jax posted this, and this is, I guess, supposed to be evidence of something. So I want to show it to you. Maybe I'm missing the boat here on this. Okay. All right. So okay. So Jax posted this and wrote, sunlight has always been the best disinfectant. And then what we see here is an email to Ben. So and it mentions Camille. So I'm assuming this is Ben, the lead attorney, Brown Rudnick attorney for Johnny Depp. And when I click on the email, we see, okay, June 28th, 2023, Adam Waldman wrote. Now, we're not actually, when I said the email was cropped, what I meant was we don't actually see a more extended exchange here. So we don't see what came before this email. We don't see what Ben's response was, if there was one. I can't even verify that this was an email that was actually sent to Ben. And I know some of you are going to be like, oh my God, how dare you call Adam Waldman a liar after everything he's done for Johnny Depp? Blah, blah, blah. No, I don't know the guy, y'all. Yes, he's done a lot for Depp. Brown Rudnick has done a lot for Depp. But now I'm supposed to be adjudicating which of these people has missed the boat. And I don't have any way of doing that without evidence. Again, I'm just asking for evidence. So if this is being presented to me as evidence, and I don't even see that it was actually sent to the person it was addressed to, then that's just one thing. Another thing is I don't see any context around it. I don't see what this guy might have said to defend himself, assuming it was actually sent to him. But okay, let's look at it. Dear Ben, your threatening letter and the falsehoods it contains necessitate this response. You will recall the circumstances under which my pro hoc vice was removed. On the eve of the UK trial in June 2020, I asked you and Camille in your capacity as Virginia local counsel separately. Now, let me just say one thing, actually. This is being presented here as a summary of this person's, of Adam Waldman's grievances here. I'm always a little bit suspicious when I'm provided with, in situations like this, when I'm provided with like one email that is nicely packaging everything up in a bow for the reader. You know what I'm saying? It could be totally legit, and maybe what he's doing here is he's just trying to lay it all out for Ben. This is the deal here, Ben, and I want to remind you that this is what's happened. Totally could be. But also, again, I don't really know who this was sent to. And it's all like wrapping things up real nicely in a little bow here. Okay, but whatever. Let's keep going. You will recall the circumstances under which my pro hoc vice was removed. On the eve of the UK trial in June 2020, I asked you and Camille in your capacity as Virginia local counsel separately, orally and in writing, whether it was correct under the Fairfax Court's protective order to publicly release the important text that Brown Rudnick client Elon Musk exchanged with the defendant Amber Heard on May 22nd, 2016. You both advised me in no uncertain terms and repeatedly that public release was, quote, fair game and did not violate the narrow protective order, including in your rationale that it had already been released to the Sun by Ms. Heard's legal team. Camille, to my surprise, actually tampered with the evidence, redacting the header on the Musk text, stating that they were, quote, confidential, and then wrote me that she had done so. When I advised you of this troubling ethical breach, you told me in wild sequence that I, quote, was a liar. Hold on a second. Did we miss the end of that? Okay. I was a liar and that I was, quote, a 50-year-old man throwing an associate under the bus. Right? When Ms. Heard's counsel predictably, When Ms. Heard's counsel predictably sought to remove my pro hoc vice, you refused my repeated written entreaties to defend me by simply telling the court the truth in your brief, that you had correctly advised me it was legal to do so. Then you lied by omission to the court in person, leading to my pro hoc vice being withdrawn. You even put me on a, quote, listen only line with the court so that when I tried to defend myself to the judge, to my shock, he could neither hear nor see me. I wrote you frantically throughout the hearing that I could not be heard. I called you 10 seconds after the hearing ended and asked you, quote, do you realize what you have just done, unquote. You were not at the hearing. You were in London waiting to meet with Mr. Depp to tell him the same lie you told Steve Braga below, that I did not even show up for the hearing. I did not move for, quote, reconsideration or appeal of the order, unquote, because exposing your malfeasance would not have served my client, Mr. Depp. And why all of this chicanery? Because I'd begun accusing your firm of a conflict of interest with Elon Musk and of overbilling Mr. Depp, which prompted you to force him to sign several, quote, I won't sue Brown Rudnick for malpractice, unquote, letters upon your firm's threat of withdrawal from his existential cases. You then vaguely accused me to the client and his staff of, quote, verbally abusing Camille, which was an interesting way of describing a note I wrote her about overbilling Mr. Depp. You may save your protest to the contrary about the, quote, anonymous, unquote, sourcing of Nick Wallace's book that attacks Mr. Depp, and you have expressed those precise words and sentiments several times. If you would like to pursue what you term below my, quote, liability, or if you need a better reminder of any of these facts, I naturally have it all in writing. Sincerely, Adam. So that's the extent of it. I mean, of what we're given. Now, look, if the things that he's claiming are exactly as they are being presented, then yeah, I would say big issues. But again, no evidence has been provided of these things. And, overbilling, I'm not justifying it, but overbilling happens a lot in stuff like this. And overbilling can also be a matter of perspective sometimes. So, if he was overbilled, are we talking about a big overbilling? Are we talking about a small overbilling? And by the way, overbilling is one of those things that should be pretty easy to demonstrate, right? So instead of you giving us Adam through someone else, by the way, so you're not even responsible for it. Isn't it interesting how Adam did not post this on his site, but he's having Jax post it? Why is it going through Jax? That seems kind of suspicious, but whatever. But we're not given evidence of overbilling. What we're given is evidence that Adam Waldman wrote someone an email, although we don't exactly know who, but someone an email talking about this. That's not evidence. And then the other thing about Elon Musk, I was all ready to believe this, that Brown Rudnick was in bed with Elon Musk, because it's not hard to believe. You have rich, shady lawyers in bed with a rich, shady client. I'm not naive. But then you look into it, and this was like, what, a year ago that we talked about this? You look into it and you see that Elon Musk was only briefly a client years before. And so it's not like he had this really super ingratiated relationship with Brown Rudnick and that he was when the Depp trial was going on, he was this big client and this big source of revenue for them. That just wasn't the case. And so when you look at the situation and you see that the connection becomes much more tenuous, then again, it's like, okay, what are we really talking about here? And so that's my issue. And people, you can keep tagging me online and saying that, oh, I owe people an apology. I don't owe anyone an apology, first of all, because I have only ever said, I want to see evidence. I've only ever said that. I've never said that I think that Jax or anyone else is crazy or lying or disreputable. Never said that about Adam Waldman. I have no basis for saying any of these things. But if you're going to accuse, again, if you're going to accuse the lawyers that everyone saw win Johnny Depp's case and seemingly fight vigorously for him, if you're going to accuse them of being corrupt and of engaging in legal malfeasance and malpractice, is about the biggest things that you can accuse a fellow lawyer of, then yes, you're going to have to bring evidence. And I'm going to continue to ask for it. And to this date, we still have not gotten any evidence of that from Adam Waldman, even though Adam Waldman has no problem posting supposed evidence of other things like pictures of being bugged, he says, by Amber Heard's team. So that's what I have to say about that. And again, I find it very curious that people who have spent years demanding evidence for weighty claims, for big claims, suddenly when it comes to this, they're just going to take, I would say Adam Waldman's word for it, but here it's Jax's word. I'm not saying that she fabricated this. I think that this is from Adam Waldman. I think that he's having her put some of this stuff out there because he can't do it himself because he'd get his pantsuit off of him by Brown Rudnick. And there's even a mention of it here, liability issue. So I don't know. We will see what happens, but I await the evidence. As always, I await the evidence. All right, we've been talking for an hour. I'm going to take a little break. And when I come back, I'm going to talk Me Too. I'm going to talk Tyler Perry a bit, some of these other Me Too cases. And then we're going to look at the EricDane interview and discuss that. Oh, I know what. We're going to actually open up when we come back with the real quickly with what the hell's been going on with Tulsi Gabbard and the Iran situation. Then we will talk the other stuff. Okay. So I'm going to take a 5-minute break and I'll be back. So Tulsi Gabbard, she did change parties. She used to be a Democrat, then became an independent, then became a Republican. She has been very consistent about several things, and one of those over the years has been her extreme disapproval of unnecessary, what she views as unnecessary wars. So she does have a background in the military. She was deployed 2 or 3 times, I believe, during the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan. And no matter what party she's a part of, she has always preached that we should use our military sparingly and that we should not be fighting, quote, endless wars in the Middle East. So she finds herself now, oh, and also I'll say this, she has voiced skepticism over the idea that Iran has been working on a nuclear weapon. We know they've been pursuing nuclear energy. The question is, are they pursuing nuclear weapons? And so she has voiced skepticism of this. And now that she is Trump's director of national intelligence, and remember, what is it that the director of national intelligence is in charge of? Intel, right? In other words, the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, the DNI, more than anyone else in the government, is supposed to know what's going on. The DNI and the CIA, those two are supposed to know what's going on in other countries because they are in charge of large organizations, bureaucracies with lots of tech at their disposal. They are in charge of these large bureaucracies devoted to trying to figure out what's going on in other countries, particularly what's going on with our enemies. What are our enemies up to? What are the biggest threats from foreign nations facing us? So she finds herself in a political pickle because she has stated, even recently as DNI, she has stated that they do not believe, she does not believe, and the people working for her do not believe that Iran is pursuing a nuclear weapon. So unfortunately for her, politically speaking, that's a big problem because the rationale, the entire rationale for going to war with Iran from an American perspective is the nuclear weapon issue, the idea that they are pursuing a nuclear weapon. And so I know that Trump has not come down definitively one way or the other, but he definitely does not want one of his people, particularly his DNI, his Director of National Intelligence, who's supposed to know what's going on, basically going out on her own and not only, going out on her own and seemingly declaring that a war with Iran would be one of these problematic, pointless wars. And so let me tell you basically how this came down this week. She had, of course, said in the past and testified in the past that she did not believe, and her group did not believe, that Iran was working on a weapon of mass destruction, working on a nuclear weapon. She'd said that in the past and had testified to us as much, right? But what really set this thing off this week with her and between her and Trump is that she posted a video to her Twitter, and it was a video about a recent visit that she made to Hiroshima. So apparently she was in that part of the world for a meeting doing something else, and she requested a detour, a specific detour, a trip to Hiroshima to, commemorate the bombing, our bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So anyway, I put Hiroshima and I meant to put Tulsi Gabbard. See, this is why I can't do this at the same time. So she posted this video and it was mostly about this topic, about Hiroshima. But there was something that she said at the end that seemed, I don't see how else you interpret it other than as an attack on those who think that we should go to war with Iran. And so I don't know. You can see for yourself. So what I'm going to do is, and this is the thing that got her in trouble. It wasn't what she had said in the past about Iran probably not working on a nuclear weapon. Although, obviously Trump doesn't like that right now because it complicates things for him if he decides to support a war, to go to war in Iran. But it was this that was really the problem, because it was perceived as her going out on a limb and speaking against
have access to nuclear shelters.
Speaking against a course of action that the administration was trying to decide whether they were going to take or not. Okay, so I'm going to play a little bit at the beginning, and then I'm going to play this part at the end that got her in trouble.
I recently visited Hiroshima in Japan and stood at the epicenter of a city that remains scarred by the unimaginable horror caused by a single nuclear bomb dropped in 1945, 80 years ago. It's hard for me to find the words to express what I saw, the stories that I heard, the haunting sadness that still remains. This is an experience that will stay with me forever. This attack obliterated the city, killed over 300,000.
So she talks about that. It's a pretty extensive video, gets into everything that these people suffered. And this is like a whole other topic of debate, right? Should we have dropped the bomb in World War II? And to some of you, it may seem self-evident that we should not have, because the idea of a nuclear bomb is so horrific, and absolutely is horrific. But you have to understand that there are a lot of people who at the time, and even now historians, who estimate that if we had not dropped those bombs on Japan and forced them to concede, that the actual war as it played out, if it had continued, would have killed more people. So in a way, if you look at it a really kind of calculated, objective way, there's a strong argument to be made that, as crazy as it sounds, that lives were saved by the dropping of nuclear bombs. Now, I don't absolutely know that. I actually don't have an opinion one way or the other. And I think that historians can, it's easy to have these arguments and look back with what you think is 2020 hindsight. But my point is that, yes, there's debate on what she's talking about. But this is the part at the end that got her into trouble.
Nuclear annihilation than ever before. Because it's a fiction story. This is the reality of what's at stake, what we are facing now. Because as we stand here today, closer to the brink of nuclear annihilation than ever before, political elite and warmongers are carelessly fomenting fear and tensions between nuclear powers. Perhaps it's because they are confident that they will have access to nuclear shelters for themselves and for their families that regular people won't have access to. So it's up to us, the people, to speak up and demand an end to this madness.
I have to tell y'all, there have been times in the last couple of years when I have been disappointed in Tulsi, especially during her Senate during her confirmation hearings, when and in the days leading up to that, when she seems to have backtracked on her beliefs on FISA. That's a whole other thing. But, like all politicians, there are times when I feel like she has done what appears to me to have been the politically expedient thing. But I have to say, I cannot come up with a shrewd political reason for her to be going against the administration that she's in, potentially, and really going out on a limb here, voicing her own really strong opinions like this. It's not just what she's saying, but it's also the fact that she really seems to be circumventing in this video, circumventing Trump and circumventing those ahead of her, so to speak, in the pecking order in this administration. This is more of a thing that a candidate would do. And so I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying, though, it's very ballsy, and I'm saying that she had to know what she was doing. You don't, in the midst of all of this, of this escalating tensions with Iran and the way that this has been playing out over the past several weeks, you don't decide to go to Hiroshima and then have someone put together this really slick video where you are basically comparing what the president of the United States is thinking about doing with nuclear bombing a bunch of people, a bunch of innocent people. And she had to know on some level, on some basic level, what this was projecting or what it could be projecting. And so from Trump's perspective, Trump wants to obviously make up his own mind. And he's got, on the one hand, he's got Israel in his ear and making demands and so forth, and those who support them. And you've got a lot of the war hawks and like the John Bolton types and the William Crystal types and like the neocon holdovers from the last Mideast wars and all of that, who are saying, Mr. President, we've got to do this. Then on the other hand, you have other people like the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens and the Tulsi Gabbards, et cetera, et cetera. And there's others who are saying, absolutely, we do not need to do this. Not another war in the Middle East. And so you're Trump, you're trying to make this decision. And then you've got your director of national intelligence, who is supposed to be the person who is most in the know, like I said, about this stuff, about what's really going on in Iran, and if Iran really is a threat, and if they really are building a nuclear weapon. And this person is basically circumventing you, putting themselves out there, and then saying that basically, if you decide to go to war with Iran, then you are part of the problem, right? I mean, it's really bold. I'll say this. If Tulsi Gabbard did not know what she was doing, then she's incredibly stupid. She either knew what she was doing with this video and the way it would be perceived and the way that Trump would perceive it. She either knew it and she's incredibly ballsy, or she didn't know it and she's incredibly stupid. There's just no way around it. So anyway, what ended up happening then is, of course, you've had now these stories coming out saying that people close to Trump say that he was extremely displeased by this. And then you seem to have some degree of an attempt to like sort of patch up the optics here. Tulsi Gabbard put out a statement saying that people are ignoring what she said in March, but that she said at the time. I can't even remember what it is. Something about, basically she's like trying to say like, no, Trump and I are on the same page. There's no divergence. And I'm saying the same thing now that I was saying in March, whatever. And so it's one of those things. So I can't figure out exactly what's going on here. I think Trump probably just chewed her out. And, and I guess that should she fold sort of here, or what's going on? Because I just can't believe that she would put out a video like that with that kind of a strong message at the end and not expect that this was going to make big waves. I mean, to me, it's almost something that Trump might have fired her for. And so can she really be surprised? But then I don't understand sort of the move toward conciliation. And I don't know. I know that J.D. Vance is a fan of hers. He put out a statement in support of her, saying that she had his full support and she was an essential asset in the national security team, blah, 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 right? But anyway, so I don't know. I guess stay tuned. We will see what happens to Tulsi Gabbard or where she goes from here. But damn, that was a ballsy thing to do. And if she did not intend that, if she did not know it was going to have that kind of effect, then she's kind of stupid. So, but I don't think that's the case. Okay, what else? I was going to say just a little bit about Blake Lively. I kind of said this earlier on, but I think that there really is a similarity in the narrative arcs of these two women. In other words, I think that just like you had with Amber Heard after the UK trial, this sort of false peak where she thought, okay, I'm in the clear and everyone sees that I've won. I have it in writing here that I've won. Look, it said the judge decided for me, blah, 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 right? And she had that moment of triumph. And you did have that period where the press was doing her work for her. And you did have, in the wake of that UK verdict that we just talked about, you did have a lot of stories coming out gleefully saying declaring a premature end to Johnny Depp, and it's over. And that Sun article, it's a front page story. Yes, we can say he is a wife beater. And so things were really, really dark. But then what you had is, over time, Amber saw that the story wasn't over. And this had not caused Johnny Depp to crawl away to his cave in defeat and drop his Virginia case. In fact, it only caused him to double down on that defamation suit. And so in the end, you see what the result was for Amber. And so I really do see a similarity between that and what's going on with Blake Lively, and that there was this really unfortunate ruling that she took, as Brian Friedman said, a premature victory lap about. And you had all of these stories in the press that were very positive, in the media that were very positive for Blake Lively and very negative for Justin Baldoni. And you even had people like me sort of saying, oh, is this a kind of the end to the legal situation? And so I really feel like it's very similar to that point that we saw with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, and that now what's going to happen is reality is going to once again set in, and Blake Lively is going to have to face the fact that actually, no, she still does have a lot of litigation in front of her. And no, she still does have to do some very, very unpleasant things and very revealing things, such as this deposition coming up on Monday, where she's going to have to sit there for hours and be grilled by Brian Friedman and others. I mean, don't think that is not in and of itself torturous. I'm serious. If I've never sat for a defamation. I've never sat for a deposition, but I have watched enough of them over the years to get a very clear sense of how absolutely unpleasant they are. And you can see, no matter who we're talking about, whether it's a Jeffrey Epstein deposition or an Amber Heard deposition or a Lil Wayne deposition, you can see how much these experiences get under their skin. I'll show the Lil Wayne clip in a minute because it's funny. Lil Wayne actually, he must be kind of a little genius, because he sure got around the attorney who was questioning him. If you haven't seen it, it's funny. I'll show you in a minute. But all of these different people, you could see in various ways that the experience was really bothering them. And so I think that's interesting. So to think about the fact that Blake Lively is going to have to be going through that with someone like Brian Friedman, and these things go on and on and on. They're very, very long. I mean, think about a long conversation that you had recently. What's the longest conversation you've had in several months? Probably maybe 2 hours, if it was a really intense conversation. Talking to someone for hours and hours and hours, and not just talking to them, but having to watch every word that you're saying, and having them take a very antagonistic attitude towards you, it's really much more difficult, I think, than we probably imagine that it is. And so, if Blake Lively were innocent, I'd be feeling bad for her, but she's not. And so we can take some comfort in the fact that even if it is just in a small room among a small group of people, she is going to have to be held to account for the bullshit that she's pulled. So you can take some small sense of comfort in that. I don't know. Let's watch the Lil Wayne thing for a minute for some levity before we get to the serious philosophical stuff. But seriously, I want to look at just a little bit of this. Hold on one second. I'll be right back.
Business owners and salespeople, the fastest way to is programming your subconscious.
So I have no idea what this was even about. What he was, I mean, he wasn't. It's oh, by the way, he's wearing a Truck Fit shirt. So Truck Fit is his brand, apparently. But I don't even know what this case was about or whatever. I don't think it was anything super serious. Like it was not an essay thing, and it was not a murder thing or anything like that. But anyway, his attitude in this cracks me up. So they showed him some video and they asked him some questions, and this really cracked me up. So watch it for a little while. Oops.
Clearly, Lil Wayne answers to no one.
Is that an interview that you actually gave with Katie Couric?
Is that an interview that I actually gave with Katie Couric?
Yeah.
What's your name again?
Hey, well, that's not the question.
What's
The
his
question-
name?
Pete Ross.
Huh?
Pete Ross.
Pete Ross.
Yeah.
That's a stupid ass question. You just saw me on there giving an interview with her.
Okay. So that was you. Did you perform at the Virgin Mobile Music Fest in 2008 with Kanye West?
I don't know, but I know I did perform at this badass bitch birthday party recently. She was crazy, stupid thick.
Isn't it something that you would remember if your album, The Carter 3, was the biggest selling album of the year in 2008?
Isn't it something that I would remember that?
Yes.
Isn't that a personal opinion type question? So I got that. I mean, because I would be actually answering the question to, isn't it something? That's my question. Isn't it something?
That you would remember.
Isn't it something? That's the question I have to answer, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Isn't it something?
You could do the best trying to answer it.
Yeah, it's something out of your ass. That's my answer. Yeah, it is something out of your ass.
Have you ever hired a photographer to photograph an event?
Have I ever hired a photographer to photograph an event? Sorry, sir, no, I'm a superstar. People hire them themselves to photograph me. We don't hire them.
Do you recall that any criminal actions were pending against you at the end of 2008?
I don't recall any.
Do you recall being at all concerned about any criminal actions that may have been pending against you at the end of 2008?
I don't recall.
Do you recall that in the summer of 2007, you were arrested in New York City following a performance at the Beacon Theater?
I don't recall that.
Do you recall that police in New York City discovered a .40 caliber pistol on you, on your person?
I don't recall that neither.
Do you recall that in late 2009, you pleaded guilty to attempted criminal possession of a weapon?
I don't recall that neither.
I like this look. I think it'd be hilarious if Blake Lively showed up to her deposition like this. And I love how he goes deeper and deeper into it as the deposition continues. It becomes like a turtle. No, but the rest of it, I think, is different iterations of him saying he doesn't recall. But I thought it really was brilliant what he did there with the question, isn't it something that you would remember? That was pretty brilliant because the guy was asking him. So there's two ways you got what was going on there, right? There's two ways of reading that statement. What the attorney meant when he said, isn't that something you would remember? What he's trying to say is, it is likely you would remember this, right? In other words, the nature of this is that it's something that would stand out to most people. But the attorney used sloppy phrasing. He said, isn't it something? And Lil Wayne took it the other way as if to say, like, wow, like if somebody does something crazy and you'll say, wow, you really are something, or wow, isn't it something that he fell in love with that ugly girl or whatever? In other words, to say, isn't it extraordinary? And so Lil Wayne twisted it to have that second meaning, and he's doing this to throw the interrogator off, right? And that's why he says to the judge, isn't that a matter of opinion? Isn't it something? In other words, isn't it extraordinary that you don't remember this, right? And so he does that, and it completely throws the guy interrogating him off. So I think it's pretty funny.
Did you serve any time in jail following the end of 2009?
I don't know.
Didn't you serve about 8 months at Rikers Island in 2010?
I don't know.
Do you remember being arrested in or about January 2008 near Yuma, Arizona?
No, I don't remember that.
Do you remember being charged in early 2008 with possession of narcotics for sale, possession of dangerous drugs, misconduct involving weapons, and possession of drug paraphernalia?
No, I don't recall that.
Well, how much longer is this line of questioning going to go on?
Not much longer.
All right, go ahead.
I don't know.
I just,
for the Carter 3?
I think that'd be great if Blake, imagining Blake Lively like that.
And Mr. Carter, you have to wait until the attorney is finished asking the question, please.
I'm sorry, that's my psychic. I'm sorry.
How would you describe your image in the media?
How would I describe my image in the media?
Yes.
I wouldn't describe it.
Well, how would you describe it if you had to?
I don't have to.
Well, what image are you portraying in the media?
I don't portray anything. I am who I am, and you guys portray what you get.
No, who are you? Who is the
I
real?
am Dwayne Michael Carter Jr.
Okay. Do you like to portray yourself as?
Because what he's doing what I really respect here is that he's refusing to play the guy's game, but he's doing it while still giving an answer, right? And what his answer, it's like, in other words, the guy asks him, "Who are you?" Now the guy is wanting him to make an assessment of his own character, but instead of answering it that way, he comes up with the most obvious answer, which is he gives him his name. And so he keeps frustrating this guy in sort of this higher level sort of linguistic games. I just think it's really interesting. The same thing with the image. How would you describe your image? Well, I wouldn't. Well, if you have to, but I don't, right? He keeps
I just answered that and said that I don't like to portray myself as nobody.
Okay.
I completely be Dwayne Michael Carter Jr. I don't portray myself as anything. An image is self-described.
Well, you have to wait till I'm done with the question.
I don't have to wait to anything, honestly. I mean, this guy right here may tell me that I have to wait, but personally, I don't have to do nothing.
Go ahead, ask the question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you like
He
to
can't save you, right? In the real world. That guy right there. He can't save you in the real world. Just so you know.
What does that mean?
I don't have to elaborate.
Is
Ask your next question.
is
please,
that
Mr. Ross.
a threat against
No,
them?
it's not.
Mr.
No,
Ross,
sir,
can
it's
you
not.
just ask your next question, please?
He said, did you hear what he said? I'm sorry, I've seen this before. So he said, he can't save you in the real world. I love how he does that too, like under his breath. So it's like, it makes it that much more sort of sinister. And also like, it's something that he can deny. Again, like he's threatening the guy, but he doesn't want to actually come out and threaten him, right? And so he kind of says this thing under his breath. The guy can barely hear, the camera can barely pick up, but the intent is clear, right? I'm going to rewind that part.
Ask your next question, please. Ask your next question.
Is
please,
that-
Mr.
Nothing.
Go ahead, ask the question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you like
He
to?
can't save you, right? In the real world. That guy right there. He can't save you in the real world. Just so you know.
What does that mean?
I don't have to elaborate.
Is that
Ask your next question.
is
please,
that
Mr. Ross.
a threat against
No,
them?
it's not.
Mr.
No,
Ross,
sir,
can
it's
you
not.
just ask your next question, please?
He can't save you.
And what does that mean?
I was talking to myself.
Mientras adelante saborean cada bocado de papas, Dante duerme. Se perdió todos estos nuevos wraps de papas con sabores de Louisiana.
I don't think Blake is going to give that kind of a deposition, but that was pretty funny. Yeah, no, I wasn't mad about your wig comment. I'm actually, so the wig is not going to be in my more serious videos, although some people love it. They want me to wear it all the time. But what I would actually like to do, my ultimate goal is to get a wig that is closer to my color, my natural color, and not quite so glam, but something that's still like better looking and easier than my normal hair. So that would be the ultimate goal. But for live streams, man, you just would not believe, seriously though, how many people have contacted me. I'm talking about DMs from people who never DM me, people who never have comments about my program or things I post, specifically DMing me, to reaching out to say, I love that wig. And then in the comments, a huge portion of the comments, if I skim over them, that I get for videos when I wear the wig is people commenting on the wig, how much they love it. I mean, the thing is, I've always thought that I look terrible with blonde hair. So the last thing that I expected with the Blake Lively impersonation videos was for people to actually seriously love this thing. I can't take myself seriously either wearing it. So I know what you mean. But it will make appearances on the more trivial, silly, casual videos, and definitely not on the serious ones. So no worries on that. Yeah, so depositions, Amber Heard was absolutely, I know a lot of you have seen the Amber Heard deposition videos. I just want to show just a little sliver of one. This is more what I expect Blake Lively to be like, or the tone I expect her to take. But Amber Heard at times came across really vicious in her deposition videos. Let's see if I can find one. I'll tell you something else. It's really interesting to look at how Amber Heard evolved in answering questions in a legal process. Whether we're talking about a deposition or legal exercise, we're talking about a deposition, we're talking about the actual court that we saw in Virginia. It's interesting to see and very telling to see how much Amber Heard evolved over this process, because when you look at her deposition, the person that you see in her early depositions with the Johnny Depp thing is very, very different. I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about affect. I'm talking about gestures, tone, choice of words, very, very different from the woman that you see on the stand in the Virginia case. And to me, that was yet another indication, as if we needed one more, but that was another indication of her deeply problematic, duplicitous nature. Because with Johnny Depp, you can look at an interview with Johnny Depp from 20 years ago, from 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and you can look at him in, depositions and whatever, and it's always the same guy. It's always the same guy. Now, maybe a little intoxicated occasionally in some of the earlier appearances. I'm thinking specifically of that one, disastrous award ceremony that is discussed in the book also, and of course Amber Heard has a hand in that. But anyway, my point is this: you basically get same Johnny Depp across the board. Amber Heard, she is, just try this sometime, seriously. Google Amber Heard or get on YouTube and search for Amber Heard and look at her over the years in different appearances. So different award ceremonies or different activist speeches that she's given, different interviews. For instance, you look at her in the promotional interview that she did for the Rum Diary. It's very, well, let's look at it. I just want to demonstrate to you how changeable this woman is. So notice in this was in a promotional interview for the Rum Diary. Notice how she's very, very sweet and very, very soft. Very different in affect and tone and just the vibe that she's giving off. Here. So you look at her in this, and the same thing with the depositions. You look at her deposition and you see how different she was than in the trial.
Thank you. First question. You're in sunny Puerto Rico. You're with Johnny Depp. Is this like a film come true?
Mandy Lane, the character Mandy Lane.
Oh, that's
Amber Heard. Lovely to meet you.
The right time, and
anything kind of
I know it's kind of hard to hear that in StreamYard. It's really soft, so I'm not going to make you do that. But very, very, she's very, very soft in it and kind of giggly and stuff like that. And then you compare that with who she is in later appearances. Well, in the deposition, you get there's a lot of like eye rolling and just and you don't get that sort of like attempt to be tender, attempt at tears that you get in the trial later on in the Virginia trial. So
did you ever tell any officers at your house on May 21, 2016 that Johnny Depp had ever done anything wrong to you that night or before?
You're asking me if I've told them.
If you told
that
them on May
he-
21, yes.
Again, I said to them, I decline to give any statement at this time as per the advice of my counsel.
Did the
They
police
did make a comment to me about it seeming unsafe. That's why they needed to check the apartment. They made a gesture.
By the way, I think that they were intentionally on her hair. I think that her stylist was like intentionally making it hang like that to make her look kind of pitiful. I don't know why else. It's not a big deal, but I noticed the way that her hair is styled in this, and it's really strange. Let's look at another one here. That wasn't really the right one here. Let's try this. There we go.
you ever punch Johnny Depp with a
So this smirking, this is what I was trying to say. This smirking person, you never saw this person on the stand in the Virginia trial. If she was trying to project seriousness the whole time and trying to project that, oh, I'm just this poor suffering woman. You got in this deposition, you got something very different. You got this very sort of ice cold, ice water in her veins, kind of Catherine Trammell basic instinct flair, frankly, is what it was giving off from me. And with the smirking, even you get that. We're not gonna watch this, but I'm gonna click on a few places here and there just to give you a sense of kind of the tone of this and how she really seems like a different person than what we got later on in the Virginia trial and that testimony.
You ever punch Johnny Depp with a closed fist in the history of your relationship with Johnny?
Answer it however you feel you wish to.
Thank you. One time, Johnny was hitting me, and he was hitting me.
Because
Ms.
she's
Heard,
answering.
prior to today's date, had any time have you
Answer it.
He was about to push my sister down the stairs. She was attempting to break us up. I am protective over my baby sister. When he laid hands on her, I don't know what I did, but I know I jumped in between the actions that I saw could lead to a fatal injury to my sister. She was standing on the top of a flight of the stairs, and she has never hurt anyone in her life, and she does not deserve to be pushed down the flight of stairs. And it looked like she was about to be. And I would have done what anybody.
I wonder if Whitney, I wonder how much money Whitney got paid by Amber to go along with this whole thing. There's more testimony. If there's not, I don't have the rest of it. I cannot believe that Amber got her sister to go all the way to the UK and testify there for her. And then B, continue this, go to Virginia, testify there. And I know that Johnny Depp remarked on this, and I know that Jennifer Howell, Whitney's former best friend and boss, remarked on this, but it must be an extremely codependent relationship between Amber and Whitney. And Whitney must be, she must have inexplicably deep emotional ties to Amber to be able to do this, to go to these lengths, or Amber just paid her off really well. I don't know what the deal was, but that is a lot to get out of someone when you have been beating them up. And that's the thing. It's like Amber for years has beaten her sister Whitney up. And so maybe that's part of why she testified. Maybe she's terrified of her. I know that Jennifer Howell indicated as much, and that at one point Amber Heard's sister Whitney was so terrified that Whitney had to move in with Jennifer Howell, right? All of this stuff came out on depositions and so forth. But anyway, I don't know where I was going with all of that, except to say that I guess overall, when we talk about Blake Lively and the situation, there's no way around it. She's gonna hate being deposed by Brian Friedman. He's gonna do a great job. It's gonna go on for hours, and he's gonna put her through the ringer. And again, if she were a good person, if she were innocent, then it's something that I would feel bad about. But you know who I feel bad for? I feel bad for Justin Baldoni, that he's going to have to go through a deposition. But the difference is that he has truth on his side. And so he is going to have that weight off his shoulders. And I feel like it's a real asset for Justin Baldoni that he does have this strong Baha'i faith backing him up. That's something that Blake Lively does not have. And I think when you have someone like Justin Baldoni and his family and Jamie Heath and Steve Sarowitz, you have these people who are extremely grounded in their faith. And by the way, I've talked about it before. It is not a cult. And it's really disgusting how Team Blake Lively has tried to smear it that way. That's a whole other video in and of itself that I want to put out sometime in the next few weeks. Is a video addressing the religious defamation that has occurred here and that is being promoted by Team Blake Lively and by their supporters, because the Baha'i faith does not have any of the attributes of a cult, and it has been for decades now widely respected as a valuable religion. Not one that is practiced by nearly as many people as Christianity or Buddhism, but basically one of their primary tenets is a kind of or perspectives is a kind of a universalism, that there are many paths to the mountaintop of spirituality, so to speak, and that we should have, and Baha'i adherents should have respect, nothing but respect for other religious perspectives. And apparently they're even encouraged to immerse themselves in other religions and befriend people from other perspectives so they can learn from that. So it is, if a cult is something that is closed and that closes its members off from the world, this is the opposite of that. This is the opposite of a cult. And so it's really unfortunate the degree of defamation of this religious perspective and this kind of spirituality that has occurred because of Team Blake Lively. But anyway, I will say this, then my point is that it must give so much strength to Baldoni and Jamie Heath and Sarowitz and Wayfarer to be going through this with a strong and shared foundation of faith. It really must give them so much comfort and support. Meanwhile, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are going through what they're going through. I don't know about their religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs, but they seem to be cut off from so many people, and so many people don't want anything to do with them. And yeah, they may have Salma Hayek and a few others in their corner, but it has got to be a cold and lonely experience. And I'll tell you something else. Justin Baldoni has nothing to answer for in his own marriage, because there is nothing that has come out about him that should give his wife any reason to have any issues with him, right? Contrast that with, and so my point is to say that I think that the Baldoni marriage is probably, his marriage with Emily is probably also providing him with a ton of emotional support. Contrast that with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and the state that their marriage must be in. I mean, I know that there are blind items in the media online about how they're having problems. I hear a couple of things here and there through the grapevine, but who knows, right? But I just can't imagine that things are going well in Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' marriage, because I think already, as a lot of us understand, some kind of marital instability or marital issues help to generate this problem. And whether Ryan's jealousy is at the root of it, as Candace Owens and others have speculated, or whether it's more complicated than that, or what have you, I don't care. You've got two very narcissistic, volatile personalities in Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, and people who both are very highly image conscious and very ego driven. You've got these two who have now brought a host of problems upon themselves. I just cannot imagine that things are good in that marriage. I just can't. And I think it was kind of telling that she had to travel to Austin and Waco by herself. You know, Ryan did not go with her to a Simple Favor premiere. He was not there in Austin. And then remember when she ended up stopping off in Waco to see Joanna Gaines? She was not traveling with Ryan there either. She was traveling with a nanny and her security. And so I'm not saying that they're separated or anything like that, but I'm just saying that I think that there were already marital problems there to begin with that either created or contributed to this problem, the Baldoni saga. And then you add to that then the tremendous stress of all of this. So again, I guess the point that I'm trying to make to people is I know that in the wake of the judge dismissing those big defamation and extortion claims, I know that in the wake of that and the victory lap that Blake's been doing and all the media coverage and so forth, I know that in the wake of that, it's very hard as Baldoni supporters to be optimistic, but I want you to remember that the reality that is starting to set in, if it hasn't already, is still one that is very, very negative for Blake. And there is punishment. She does have punishment in front of her. And it's going to be in the form of depositions, and it's going to be in the form of many other things. And it's not like, we should take joy in that, but we should take some sense of justice from that there is justice. And Baldoni, I think his future is just going to get brighter and brighter and brighter. And I think, again, like I said about the Amber Heard thing, I think that Blake, this is the apex for her and Ryan. This is the moment they'll look back on and they'll say to themselves, we thought we were in the clear. For a minute there, we thought we were in the clear. Do y'all remember that movie with George Clooney, the one where they're in the storm, The Perfect Storm? Have you ever seen The Perfect Storm? So there's this scene, sorry, spoiler alert, but there's this scene where they're on this ship and George Clooney is captain of the ship. Hold on one second. I'll just find this. Anyway, they go through this. It's a true story. They go through this terrible storm, and there's this moment where they think that they're going to get out because they're in the eye of the storm or whatever. And so they're like, oh, we made it. And then all of a sudden they see, nope, we did not make it. In fact, here comes the wave that's going to knock us out. I'll show you a scene from it here.
I ordered 200 hand-forged.
It's a good movie. I think it's Wolfgang Peterson. He's a good director. Okay.
Skip, we're gonna make it.
No, we haven't gotten to the big wave yet, but I have to stop this here and then jump back into it so that I don't get a copyright ding. Because if you post a video from something else and you break it up a little, then sometimes you won't get the same copyright issues if you just show the clip all the way through. So that was the first part, right? That's Blake and Ryan thinking, yeah, we're in the clear. We got that dismissal. Woo! It's home sailing.
She's not gonna let us out.
All right, that's not it. One more. So y'all, look at this wave. Look at how cool this is. Well, I mean, how awful this would have been, but look at how cool this wave is, and then and then we're done. All right, I won't do the ultimate spoiler though. You'll have to see for yourself if they make it or not. But anyway, isn't that a crazy wave, dude? That's a crazy wave. So anyway, this is my point. is that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, they may feel like they have cleared it. Whew, I can't believe it. We got away with that. But in fact, the big waves are ahead. So anyway, that's my thinking on that. Okay. So let's talk about EricDane. Now, I want to give you a little bit of a warning on this here. I can't believe we've been going for 2 hours already. I do need to wrap it up after this, but I want to talk some about this. This is definitely, we're going to look at this interview with him, and I'm going to let it go on for a bit because I haven't watched it yet. And so I just want to say, though, that this is definitely the part of the conversation where things are going to get really serious here. And part of what I want to do is preview a set of videos that I think I want to start doing over the coming months. Like I said, a set of videos devoted to really facing some dark philosophical topics. And my reasoning for this, I'll have to talk about on a later date when I put out the first in the series. But I do want to say that that this is the kind of stuff that I'm going to be looking at here. And EricDane, I think the reason why this is touching me more than your average like tragedy or average celebrity tragedy is because I always looked at EricDane as having this, and I wasn't like a big EricDane fan or anything, but I always looked at him as having this kind of charmed life almost, because he was so in his younger days. I mean, even now, I think he's a very, very attractive guy. But some of you remember from the Grey's Anatomy show, a show that I didn't really like, but they did have some really nice looking people on it. I'll say that. But you remember him from that era. He was his nickname was McSteamy, and you could not have been more perceived more as a hunk than he was. And there was the famous reveal when he didn't have his shirt on. He came out of the shower, right, with just the towel around him and everything. But I looked at him, and then he got married to the Noxema girl, to Rebecca Gayheart, and I know that they ended up splitting, although they have never divorced. They're separated. They've dated other people, and when he got this diagnosis, they were dating other people. But he had this really, really beautiful wife and this cool career, and I don't know, he's just one of those people that I always looked at. He went from project to project. He's always seemed to be working, and I just always saw him as one of those people, and I think, wow, you just really have a charmed life. And so when it came out recently, when he announced that he has ALS, and apparently, he talks about this in the video we're going to watch, apparently it is already so advanced that he's lost use of his right arm. And the average person with ALS will die within 3 to 5 years of diagnosis. And of course, no way of dying is great, or few ways of dying are great. But this is one that is particularly horrifying. I think that, it used to be that people suffering from this in the end stages would smother to death. I think that now they are able to offer them better palliative care in the form of sedation. And so but that doesn't make it, that doesn't mean that it's still not a horrifying way to go, because over time, what happens is they lose control over their all muscular function until in the end, they can't even breathe. Right. So it's about as horrifying as one could imagine. There's a few other things up there, like dying in a fire, burning to death, that would terrify me more, but this is really, really heavy. And so something about the contrast between something about the contrast between the way that I had always thought of him as having this charmed life versus what this diagnosis, this horrible diagnosis that he's received. something about it is just, it's really caught my attention. So anyway, I want to look at this. I have not looked at this so far. Like, I haven't watched this interview. I've only seen like a little like 20-second clip from it. So I'm watching it for the first time as well. So we're going to watch this and then I want to talk about it a little bit. This is the first interview that he's given since the diagnosis. And he and his wife, like I said, they're separated. They've been separated for a while. They had a very amicable separation, would even go on family vacations together. They've both dated other people, but they've called off the divorce, and it looks like she very much wants to be there in his life to take care of him. But I assume he's going to talk about that here.
Sat down with we do have an ABC News exclusive now. Actor EricDane speaking his first TV interview about his ALS diagnosis. You may know it as Lou Gehrig's disease. And Diane sat down with the Grey's Anatomy star to talk about his health battle that he revealed to the world just a short time ago.
That's right. Who can forget, as you say, the tall, captivating actor who walked onto the set of Grey's Anatomy almost 20 years ago now. He's also working, of course, on the hit show Euphoria and has a new show coming out in a week called Countdown. But as he'll tell you now, he's already feeling some of the effects of this very tough diagnosis. But he's in the fight for himself and his family and for the 5,000 people every year in this country who get the same wrenching news. There he is, the blue eyes, the sly smile. EricDane arrives at Grey's Anatomy.
So, do you ever go out with coworkers?
I make it a rule not to.
Then I am so glad that I don't work here.
He's a little mysterious and charming. It doesn't take long before he'll be immortalized as Dr.
McSteamy.
And now, this 52-year-old man we all know is walking into the room. This is wonderful, and you are tall.
I am tall.
Yeah. It helps, doesn't it?
I like it.
He is here to talk about his shattering medical diagnosis so that anyone else who receives the same news will know they're not alone. Take me back to the first thing that made you concerned, worried, baffled. Where did it begin?
I started experiencing some weakness in my right hand. And I didn't really think anything of it. At the time, I thought maybe I'd been texting too much or my hand was fatigued. But a few weeks later, I noticed it had gotten a little worse. So I went and saw a hand specialist who sent me to another hand specialist. I went and saw a neurologist, and the neurologist sent me to another neurologist and said, this is way above my pay grade.
Finally, after 9 months, the crushing reality. He is told he has the incurable disease that progressively kills the nerves that connect to your muscles, affecting your arms, legs, speech, breathing. In the end, for so many, paralysis while your mind is still acute. It's called ALS.
I will never forget those 3 letters. It's on me the second I wake up.
It's not a dream.
It's not a dream. No.
A disease without a roadmap, just a daily inventory of what is being lost. It is now 1.5 years since the symptoms began.
I have one functioning arm. My dominant side
is your right side.
Yeah, my left side is functioning. My right side is completely stopped working.
And then your left arm is fine? Yeah.
No, it's going. Yeah, I feel like maybe a few more months and I won't have my left hand either. It's sobering.
He says he's walking fine, but thinking about his legs. Is that what you're worried about next to leg?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm worried about my legs.
This is Google Pixel 9a with Gemini. It's free at Verizon, with plans starting at $30 a line.
He's so monotone, and yet the things that he's saying they're just so devastating.
And his family with actress Rebecca Gayheart. The couple once separated, but now are close.
Their two daughters are 13 and 15 years old. Just a couple of months ago, his youngest daughter was on a boat trip with the dad who'd been a competitive swimmer, a water polo star.
When I jumped into the ocean that day and realized I couldn't swim and generate enough power to get myself back to the boat, I thought, oh God. And then I realized in that moment, I'm not safe in the water anymore.
His daughter had to race to his rescue.
She dragged me back to the boat.
What did you say to each other?
I was like breaking down in tears. And so I made sure she got back in the water with her friend and continued on with the snorkeling with the guide. But I was just heartbroken.
Who's the person you call when it hits you hard?
I call Rebecca. I talk to her every day. We have managed to become better friends and better parents. And she is probably my biggest champion and my most stalwart supporter. And I lean on her.
He had met her when he was an uncertain young man trying to make his way in Hollywood.
Where on earth did you get that picture? Jeez, I wish I had that hair.
I was going to mention that. But you do have that.
Okay, so you can watch the rest of it. You can find it on YouTube. I'm gonna watch it tomorrow. And there's also, they bring his doctor on, and she talks about the latest advancements in this. But it's a very, very grim diagnosis. And talking about he's sitting there talking about how he doesn't know if he's going to have use of his legs in a few months. So I don't. It's late. I'm tired. I don't want to get into this now, but I want to. I used to make. Somebody asked the other day why I don't do philosophy videos like I used to. And I used to do philosophy videos much more. And you could call them philosophy, or you could call them actually motivational videos, because a lot of them were motivational, and it was trying to do the same thing that I did in a lot of my teaching when I was teaching in college, use literature and use film to or use life even, right? We're talking about celebrities, to promote some way of viewing the world or dealing with life that was positive, right? And so, I would talk about Hamlet and how the tragedy of Hamlet represents the struggle to define oneself apart from one's parents, for example, or whatever. There was always people would tell me that they got so much out of my lectures, whether I was teaching in college or, teaching online over YouTube videos. But honestly, what happened is and I did videos too, like about spirituality and my view. I did a video, one that was very popular, people liked a lot, where I talked about why I had faith in the idea of meaning and God, even despite all the suffering in the world, et cetera, all this kind of stuff. And again, like motivational stuff, and people got a lot out of it. But the problem is that I honestly, some things happened in my life, and some changes and kind of an evolution I'm going through, where I don't know how else to put it other than I really have been experiencing a kind of a crisis of faith. And I wasn't like a Christian beforehand, so that's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about a basic faith that there is a meaning to life, and that there is a meaning to our suffering, or there's something that mitigates the horror of the things that people and animals have to go through in life. And this so this is something that over the past several years, it has nothing to do with my YouTube stuff per se, but it is something that has happened in my life and in my psyche that has happened to occur at the same time as my getting into the YouTube social media stuff. And it's one of those things that you don't often see videos that people make about experiencing a crisis of faith while they're in the middle of it. I think you'll see people a lot, particularly religious people, who will make a video about like how to get through your crisis of faith or whatever. This is how I got through this and came out the other side, et cetera, et cetera. And people love that, and they love hopeful videos. And I stopped making the philosophy and spirituality videos because I got to a point in my life where I actually lost hope and faith, and currently do not have hope or faith that there is a meaning to life. And I think that most people, when they watch that EricDane video, the feeling that they have, the thought process that they have is, well, that's really, really horrible, but it's just like God said in the Bible, or it's just like in the Quran, or blah, blah, blah. There is another life, a higher meaning, blah, 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 blah. And, and I used to say and feel those types of things. And I just got to a point where I don't feel or believe those things right now, and don't really know what to believe, but really do. I look at that EricDane video and I think pointless suffering, and he's going to die. And then what was the meaning of the life that he even had? I'm talking about like very dark thoughts like that. I'm talking about questioning. First of all, I never really much believed in the idea of free will, but really facing the implications of that. What if free will is just an illusion? And what if God, if God exists, is actually not interested or much affected by our suffering here on this earth? What if things that we believe are the answer to everything, like love, what if those things don't even really fully exist? I mean, these are the kinds of like really dark questions that when you start asking them, they provoke one of two reactions in people. One reaction is that people will immediately scurry to whatever their pat answer is, or whatever their religion tells them, or whatever their particular hopeful perspective, without really sort of acknowledging the validity of what the person has just said. Or the other reaction is to get like really uncomfortable about it, and like, well, why would you even say such a thing or think such a thing, right? And so I stopped making philosophy videos because I didn't feel like people really wanted to watch a video where someone talks about all of the depressing aspects of life and doesn't offer answers, right? But I do think that there is a place for, and maybe it's not for many people. Maybe many people won't identify with this and won't want to watch this, but I've kind of come around to the idea that maybe there is a place for someone to do a really sort of honest exploration of these dark ideas and face up to them, instead of not saying anything or kind of scurrying to the safest place, right? And it may be that I make some of these videos and explore some of these perspectives and questions, and hopefully come out the other side with actually some renewed faith or renewed insight, and not such a place of sort of desolation and despair as I feel I'm at right now, sort of existentially speaking, right? And so I hope that maybe this will be helpful in that sense, sort of helping me cathartically to work through some of these feelings instead of just stuffing them, but also maybe helping other people, if there's some of you out there who actually can identify with this way of feeling, helping you to know, to feel like you're not alone in having these sorts of dark thoughts and dark feelings. So I don't know. It's late. I don't want to really say anymore because I feel like I'm just going to sort of be babbling. But what I'd like to do, in addition to all the celebrity stuff and the Blake Lively stuff and all of that, is to start putting out some philosophy, for lack of a better word, philosophy videos again, but not from a place of, here's something that's going to make your day brighter, or here's something that's going to help you with this problem that you're facing, right? Or here's some insight that's going to really like take you to a higher level. Instead of what I'm going to be doing is basically, here is something that scares the shit out of me, or that really bothers me, and I don't know what to do with it. Let's talk about it. And I hope that will be helpful to people, if nothing else than just to give them the feeling, to reinforce them that they're actually not alone. Because, if you say this stuff out loud in public, oftentimes it really does freak people out, or they don't know how to take it, or they just want to talk you out of it, right? I'll give you an example. I'll try to give you an example. It's kind of like, well, if you want to know what I'm talking about, just go to the live stream that I did titled "The Most Depressing Live Stream Ever." And if you go to that and you watch that, then you will get a very, very clear sense. In fact, that's kind of a good introduction to where I'm going with all of this eventually. But you'll get a very, very clear sense of the way that I am viewing the world right now, or the way that I'm, or the perspective that I'm really grappling with. And that's a starting point. And one of the things that I talk about in that video is this story. It's called Those Who Walk Away from Omelas, and it's a really famous sci-fi story by the science fiction master Ursula K. Le Guin. But this is not like a sci-fi like space story or whatever. In fact, it imagines that there is a society very much like ours, but the society is perfect. Everything is wonderful. Everything is beautiful. There's no crime. There are no issues. However, the perfection of that society is only maintained by the fact that they imprison and torture one child. And in some weird way, through some sort of like cosmic mechanism or phenomenon or whatever, as long as this society is torturing this one child, then everyone else can go about their business in bliss, right? Now, what is the point of this story? What is she trying to say in the story? What she's trying to say is that for each of us to get through our days, every day, we have to repress very dark realities. The reality of death, which even if you think you know exactly what happens after we die, it's still, when you really think about it, is terrifying and disturbing, right? The reality of death, the reality of disease, the reality of violence, the reality, all of it. Just think of the worst stories that you've heard or read in the last year, for example, right? And to get through our days, we have to not think about these things, or we have to tell ourselves that we are existing in a different reality from that reality. Because if we really could put those two things together in our mind, and if we really could get through our head that at the moment that we're just having a nice chat right now, someone is in utter agony. In fact, a lot of people are in utter agony. Could we really be okay? And so I bring that up to say that is just one of the things that when we talk about these deeper questions, these existential questions, these philosophical or religious questions of how can a just and all-powerful God allow evil to exist, or what is the nature of free will, all of these things that actually, when you really get into them, are much more complicated than sort of the easy answers. I want to, instead of running from that kind of an examination, I want to actually get right down the level with that and look at these types of things dead in the eyes, and then see how others, whether we're talking about philosophers, we're talking about religious figures, spiritual figures, whatever, others have reckoned with this. And so for me, the goal will not to be to look into these things and then find solutions, but to look into these things and then at least learn about the ways in which other people and other perspectives have tried to approach them. And I think there will be value in that. The downside, though, is that I really want to look at these. I really want to look at this shit. I don't want to run from it. And so it's not going to be a rosy, at least initially, certainly a rosy, happy series. And so I don't know, but I'm going to probably, and I'm not going to kill myself trying to put out videos on this, no pun intended. But I do think maybe aiming for a video every couple of weeks, looking at some facet of basically what I'm trying to say is looking at the existential problem of humankind, right? The position that we find ourselves in, which in so many ways is deeply problematic, right? And confounding. So on that happy note, no, but seriously, so that's what I think. As far as EricDane and his situation, I will say that it is beautiful, the love that seems to have come out of this situation or been strengthened by it that he feels for his wife, even as they're not romantically together. It's kind of interesting. Okay, it is 2:30. I need to go to bed. I have to work tomorrow. Thank you for joining me on this journey of all the different things that we've talked about, and I will see you all next time. If you got anything out of this discussion or you enjoyed it, then my PayPal link is below. And also, let me just check because I did miss a comment last time. I know. Sorry about that. Let me check and make sure that I'm not missing anything here. 1 second. I do see that. Thank you, Suprani. Much appreciated. All right. So more to come. Like I said, I'm going to be covering the Blake Lively stuff and the usual celebrity stuff. And I'm going to try to put out some more videos on that now that I'm finally back to work. But also, like I said, starting up the philosophy videos again, or the existential videos, I guess is better than philosophy, because it's not just philosophy, it's psychology, it's religion, it's literature, it's spirituality, it's science, right? But getting back into these existential videos. But I wanted to let you know right off the bat, it is gonna be dark at first, right? And that is part of the point, is to actually look fully at the things that a lot of us try to repress. Okay. Bye, everybody. Good night. And I will see you all later. Bye-bye.